Welcome to the Alcohol Addiction Podcast. Karla Maree, how are you doing today?
Great. Thanks, Lee. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you and your listeners. I've got a lot of really great, I think, really helpful information that's going to be really giving a lot of people hope.
And me and the community here really appreciate your time. Listen to you on the Alison Miko podcast. I thought it was absolutely fantastic. And I thought, I've got to get this beautiful lady on our podcast because she has so much to share. So let's just start. Let's not mess about here, Karla. Let's just go straight into this. What are the differences between stress and anxiety? Because prior to me and you having a pre-conversation before this podcast, I got to be honest, I didn't really think there were any difference. I thought they were one and the same. So enlighten me. What's the difference between stress and anxiety?
Stress is actually events. For example, you're stuck in traffic 2 hours a day each way as a commute. You have a hostile work environment. You have an unhappy relationship. It's not necessarily a tangible thing, but it's something you can point to and say, oh, wow, that is really stressful. Anxiety is the stress that's left over after the event is gone. So what happens is if you have the susceptible brain chemistry, you kind of get stuck in what if. You start catastrophizing. You're living in the future. It's what is it? What if this happens? What's going to happen? And then if that happens, what's going to happen? And so that is anxiety. There's no particular event going on right there at this point. It's just what happened to our brain after the event.
Oh, that's interesting. So I guess taking just a random example and tying it into alcohol, I guess back in my day, let's say I knew my ex-wife was going to come home and I knew that she was going to be drunk. So I would be stressing about that event. And then she comes home, we inevitably argue. And then after the event, because it's now gone, I'm now feeling anxious about that event. So I'm thinking, oh, this is always going to happen. My life is always going to be like this. And then I eventually then turn to alcohol or something to relieve my anxiety more so than my stress, I guess.
Well, yes, actually, what's happening is, especially if it's something that's repeated, it does get to be something that we start negatively anticipating. But if you take it down another level, really what's happening, whether the drive is for alcohol or chocolate ice cream or heroin, French bread, whatever it is, our brain is trying to get itself back to a state of what's called homeostasis or balance. So it knows something is wrong, and maybe going back to maybe your teenage years, or maybe as a young adult, you had some alcohol, or maybe you tried chocolate ice cream or heroin or whatever, and you thought, didn't last very long, but wow, that really helped me feel like I was normal again. So what happens is over time, the stressors don't go away often. And so what happens is we start relying more and more on this external thing to help us cope or, very briefly correct our brain chemistry. But the problem is it doesn't last very long. It's not a fix. It's just, it's a Band-Aid approach. It's like taking medication. It's like you have this thing going on, you take a pill, you have a glass of wine, it goes away. But if you haven't fixed the problem comes back, and sometimes worse. So then you need more alcohol, and then you need more alcohol. And of course, that leads to feelings of anger with yourself and self-loathing and guilt and, issues with family members, which are huge stressors, which then lead to even more alcohol use.
Yeah. Oh, well put. I remember when I first quit drinking alcohol, a friend of mine, I went to the bar with him. He said, what do you want to drink? And I said, well, I don't want to drink anything. And he said, well, you're in a bar, you've got to drink something. And it was the first time I realized that this is nonsense. Like, I really don't want to drink. I can be able to be in this bar and not drink, And he said to me, answer me one question, Lee. How do you handle stress if you don't drink alcohol? And I couldn't answer his question, Karla, because I now, looking back in hindsight, realize and understand that I've always suffered from stress and anxiety, more so recently because it's affected my health. Right. But I don't feel it. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I guess I can't recognize what stress and anxiety is like in a tangible sense. So can you give us a little insight as to what is going on with our minds and our body when we're both anxious and stressed, and tie that into my experience and what's going on?
Sure. So I'm going to have two repeating themes in my talking with you. One is I'm going to often refer to what I call your cup of stress, which is the accumulation of all the known and unknown stressors. And the other is the circular pattern that seems to develop when things go on. So for example, you had an event with your ex-wife, or you had something going on, and that was a stressor. And so for some people, not everybody, but for a lot of people, things like that make us very anxious. And so what happens when we're anxious is we are making more of our stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. So with the elevation of that in and of itself can be a stressor. And so a lot of times we have so many what I call hidden stressors that, the body and the brain just sort of, for some people, that just sort of short circuits. And we think we think it's normal. So we sort of become numb to how we're actually doing. We've been down or so anxious or so stressed for so long. It's normal for us. We've forgotten. And for a lot of people, the anxiety literally starts in childhood. Sometimes, it's, children are not fed right. Sometimes the mother didn't eat right when she was carrying the child. There's strife in the house. There's sibling issues in the house. Maybe you've moved or something. And all of these really take a toll on little bodies and little brains. And sometimes this gets set up for us, especially if we've got the genetics for not handling stress well, or for a predilection toward alcoholism, for example. And it becomes, again, it's a spiral, and it just it's sort of like they just sort of keep leading back and back and back to each other. And that's our new normal, is to feel like we're just constantly churned. And it isn't until we've stepped out of the situation, had opportunities to actually fix not just mask, but literally fix the brain chemistry that's gone awry, that's left us out of homeostasis, that we actually realize it's like, wow, I was just kind of surviving, I wasn't really thriving.
So that I had a little bit of an insight there. So what you're saying is, I grew up as a kid, bullied, called racial names. You're a chink, you're this, you're that. I moved house, stress. People don't like me in the new country that I'm in, stress. I then get this job on the railway, and I kept getting promoted at a very early age. And I've always felt like I was an imposter, stress, So I guess what you're saying, Karla, is I became this big stress bucket. Like my cup of stress was always full.
Right.
But I had learned to associate my being with my way of being as having a full cup. So I never really knew what having an empty cup was until I quit alcohol, and then started to philosophize, think, ask questions, fix areas in my life. And now I can tell when I'm getting more stressed and anxious than I used to, mainly because my body tells me now. It screams out to me. It makes me tired. It makes me tetchy, annoyed, angry. And before, I don't know, it's almost like the alcohol, not just the alcohol, but the alcohol and everything that associates with the alcohol, lack of exercise, eating fast food, fats, etc., kind of like blocked it away. Does that sound about right?
Right. So the brain tries and the body tries to bring us back to normal. And a lot of people think, I use alcohol to de-stress myself. But, and so like 15 years ago, when I started working with brain chemistry, I thought, oh, everybody drinks because they're stressed out. But when I started doing, neurotransmitter analysis, sort of, having people do assessments, one of the things I discovered is that's true for, a certain percentage of people, but also people can use alcohol because they're looking for a mood boost. They're using it because this was the one that, I thought, wow, this was really a revelation to me, was they use it because they need energy. They're exhausted when they come home in the evening, and they have a couple of, 6-packs of beer, or, at first it gives them some energy because it's flooding their brain with glucose. Mm-hmm. But so they're using it for some energy. There's the people who do use it for de-stress, but there's a lot of people who use it to numb out. It's like they just want to just take a step back from their life and just sort of check out, numb, reward, treat themselves. It's like, oh God, I had such a crummy day. I deserve to just sit here in the dark with my 2 6-packs, and I'm just going to tell them, don't disturb me for the next 2 hours. So, it's just our body trying to manage and bring itself back to a place of balance, but it's not sophisticated necessarily enough to say, oh, I need these specific foods that have these specific nutrients and maybe a little bit of, extra help from some supplements. But I did notice, that when I drank, I got like, wow, I felt pretty good. I felt, like I could handle stuff. Not really, but we get the altered perception from things like pot and heroin and cocaine and alcohol that lead us to believe that we're actually managing, when people on the outside are going, oh my gosh, what's up?
Yeah, when you add into that that initial experience of pot or alcohol, like fixing a problem,
right?
If you add on top of that, and the environment that you're being brought up in, the people that you're associating with, your social life, all those types of things, it becomes a habit, doesn't it? Like, we're like creatures of habit. So it's like, okay, the more I drink alcohol to like fix this issue, the more I'm going to go to it, because that's your go-to. That's what you do in life. And
right.
Instead, because like as kids, there's not many kids in the world who grow up like liking vegetables. Most kids grow up, don't want vegetables, they want sweets, and it's that. So it's that habit, that starts very, very early. I find it like really, really interesting how people just get themselves into this bad habit. A good example is people saying, "I drink alcohol to relieve stress." Mm-hmm. But there's two ways of looking at that, Karla, isn't there? There's one that looks at this short-term issue, so
the Band-Aid.
The Band-Aid. And then there's the view that we look at the Truth About Alcohol and the Strive Forum, is everything is long-term. So,
right.
So it doesn't reduce stress if you're on my forum wanting to quit alcohol. Like, it's increasing your stress, What's your views about it when people come to you and say, I quit alcohol to reduce stress?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that? People,
when you work with people and they say, I drink alcohol to relieve stress,
right?
I need it. There is no other way that I can reduce stress. I need to drink alcohol.
Okay, well, that's actually pretty easy then. Is when people are craving a substance, it's telling me their brain chemistry, their neurotransmitters, there's serotonin, there's catecholamines, there's GABA, there's the endorphins, there's others, but those are the major ones. What that's telling me is this person has a really significant deficiency. And all we need to do is figure out what these specific deficiencies are, whether it's specific vitamins, specific minerals, maybe neurotransmitter deficiencies. Let's say they're low in GABA and they're low in serotonin, and that makes them feel really stressed out and even more stressed and anxious. And it becomes, again, that little circle. So what I do is I deconstruct that. It's like, okay, this is what you've been eating. Junk food equals junk mood. You cannot support happy brain chemistry on a diet that comes out of boxes, cans, packets, things that are fast food type things, junk food. So part of the recovery is eating real food. Part of it is correcting nutrient deficiencies, and part of it is using specific products, vitamins, minerals, and then things like tryptophan or GABA, so that we get rid of so in other words, what we're doing is we're actually fixing the brain chemistry that's leading the person to say, I have to have this. It's like, you do, because you're getting a little tiny hit from it. Doesn't last long, but you keep, the more you drink, you keep getting a little boost, but it's not lasting and it's not really fixing anything. My goal is to fix the brain chemistry, to put the stop in there that says, okay, if I do these things, if I'm changing my lifestyle, if I'm changing my diet, if I'm for a while adding some specific nutrients, I am going to actually be able to walk away from alcohol. If you look at addiction treatment centers, and I used to work at one, the recidivism rate is somewhere around 80 to 85%, meaning, you know, these places charge $20,000, $30,000 a month.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the person goes in, they dry them out, they put them on antidepressants, they put them on benzodiazepines, sometimes antipsychotics, dry them out, put them through a lot of group therapy, but they haven't really addressed, you know, the antidepressants and the Ativan, the Valium. This is not fixing brain chemistry. This is putting a Band-Aid on it, so you're not feeling so anxious, so you're not feeling so down, so that you can actually, you know, get off of the alcohol without going through the DTs. You put these people back out on the street, you know, 6 weeks later, a month, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, bam, they've relapsed again. So, you know, that was one of my frustrations, and why I didn't end up, you know, continuing with it was the psychiatric model of addiction treatment is, you know, get them off the street, get them away from whatever their drug of choice is, in this case, alcohol, dry them out, and then medicate the heck out of them. Put them back out on the street, but, you know, they get tired of, you know, they don't want to take the Ativan, or they, you know, don't like how they feel so completely numbed out on the Lexapro. So they go off, and then, you know, and even while they're on these things, you know, it's like, you know, I can just have a drink. Yeah, I'm just going down to the bar. I swear I can manage just one. Of course, it's a lie. You know, it's a fiction we tell ourselves, because the brain is still hungry for what it's missing.
I have a couple of questions that come out of that, Karla.
Okay.
The first thing that comes to my mind is when I'm thinking back to when I quit drinking alcohol. So at that stage that I'm drinking every day. I'm drinking a considerable amount. And my lifestyle choices around that time were no exercise,
Right.
very stressful job. And my food choices were very bad. I used to microwave a lot of food. I was very fast food, processed food orientated, hardly any vegetables, a lot of meat, dairy, that kind of stuff. Okay. But when I quit drinking alcohol, I quit by changing my psychology. So I quit by changing my paradigm. How I believed that alcohol provided me with this, and this value. I no longer believe it provides me with this, and this value. And as I really worked on that counter brainwashing, my desire disappeared. Okay. So nobody came to me and said, change your diet. My desire changed through psychology. So I'm thinking here that a real powerful attack on this would be part psychology, part change your brain chemistry, sort your nutrition out. I tell you what did happen for me though, Karla, and I'm interested in your thoughts on this, is I immediately, and a lot of people on my forum are here right now, my interest in sugar, and let me define this, my interest in eating cake and sweets, ice cream, was very minimal. But when I quit drinking alcohol, it went through the roof.
Right.
And initially I thought it was psychological, because I would tell myself, I'm in a restaurant with my friends, everyone's drinking wine, I can't drink wine, so I will have 2 desserts. And I just assumed it was psychological. I later find out that it's not.
Right.
So let's ask you that question. What on earth is going on with everybody's desire for sugar when they quit alcohol?
Well, I mean, you go to AA meetings, you know, what do you see? Oh my gosh, it's plates and plates of cookies. When I started working at the addiction treatment center, I was horrified. You know, I'm a nutritionist, you know, and I walk in, and I'm not exaggerating, the counter was covered with plates of cookies and sweet rolls. And I looked at the director and I said, what is this? And he said, well, you know, people are detoxing. And it's like, that's not helping them at all.
Right.
You know, they think it is, but so what's happening is, you know, when we get, you know, for a lot of people, 2 things are happening. One of 2 things, or both things are happening. One is a lot of people get a big sugar hit, a big glucose hit from alcohol.
Right.
The other thing is people with, chronic alcohol use end up with a significant, this is pretty close to like about 90 to 100% across the board, end up with a fungus yeast infection called Candida.
Candida.
They're little one-celled organisms that, everybody has in their intestines. But, when you think of making wine or beer or champagne, yeast is added to this. It's added to the cycle so that the grapes are properly broken down. The juice is then converted into alcohol. So, if you're adding this, you end up with a significant Candida overgrowth. And I'll tell you, these little things are one cell, and they have some of the most sophisticated mechanisms for controlling your brain you could ever imagine. Mm-hmm. So what they do is, let's say, in your situation, okay, I'm cleaning myself up and I'm going to get rid of all the sugar and all the junk food, but I've got a lot of Candida in my gut. And so what happens is, after about the 5th or 6th day, if you can hold out that long, is the Candida are becoming really stressed because they feed on sugar. Mm. And so what's happening is they have this really sophisticated feedback mechanism to your brain that says, I have to have sugar. The brain doesn't know that that's coming from these little organisms. The brain just goes, oh my Lord, I have this insane craving for cookies, cake. It doesn't matter what it is, the jumbo, frappuccinos that are just, basically like liquid sugar.
Yeah.
And so, we feed those. And so what happens when we do that is they, over the years, eons, have developed so that they put out little boosts of things that make us feel good for a minute or two. So, it's like this lovely little feedback mechanism. We feed the Candida makes us happy for a little bit.
Right. Now, I've never done a Candida test myself, but my wife did, and found that she was kind of riddled with it. Mm-hmm. And it is very, very difficult to get rid of, right?
No.
Oh, right. Okay. Because I was led. So my next question is, how do we get rid of Candida then? Because I was told that it was really difficult.
So the short answer is, that's an entire podcast.
Right.
Or half of one, because, it involves dietary change for a while. It involves dietary changes, and there are some specific supplements that I have found incredibly helpful. But, it's not just one. And, I have lost track of the number of people who, and they do this with antibiotics too, is they'll be on something for 2 or 3 weeks and it's not long enough. And so what they do is they kill the weak ones, but then they leave the really strong ones behind. So, it's figuring out, I do a lot of gut testing. I've got a fabulous, there's some fabulous labs out there that will look at, what's going on in the gut, figure out exactly what's going on, what strains of Candida, because there's, many, it's not just Candida albicans, there's a whole bunch of different strains, mm-hmm. and figuring out what it is, and then putting people on sort of a whole life protocol. It's like changing up the food. It's giving support to the brain so that we're not, maybe with supplements like glutamine or vanadium or chromium or gymnema sylvestre or other supplements like that can help with blood sugar stability, so that if our blood sugar is stable, that's also helping us to not crave sugary things. So it's not just say, what do we do for this? It's
right.
Like, it's sort of like, it's because otherwise it's just, that's medicine. It's like, it's like what I call that, you have this condition, you take that pill. I don't, sometimes that works, but you really have to look at the whole person, the whole perspective, the whole situation. What environment are they in? What support have they got? Where have they been dietarily? Where are they now? Where do they need to be? And what kinds of nutritional support? And then what specific nutrients, herbs, whatever, to actually kill the Candida.
Okay. Okay, so if you're listening to this, folks, I will be providing Karla Maree's contact details in the show notes. And I'm telling you now, find the money, work with this lady, because, like she said, Candida in itself is an entire podcast. What we're talking about here is our health, right? And I know that as technological advancements continue and grow, and you know the new 80 is going to be the new 50 or whatever, and we're going to live longer. It's really important that as we live longer healthier, and we put our health first. And I just want to say that anyone who hasn't got the money to like look after their health, you need to check in with yourselves a little bit, because in my world and the people that I know around me, when the shit hits the fan and you need money for something, like your roof caves in or something, you find that money, right? Find it for your health. Anyway, I just wanted to say that.
Thanks.
I get a lot of people in the forum, myself included in the past, not so much now, who have a lot of food issues when they quit drinking alcohol. And I think a lot of the times it's just a realization and almost like philosophizing about your life. So you quit drinking alcohol and you feel good and you're like, okay, what else am I doing in my life that doesn't really sit with these new values? But I also feel that people kind of look for a diet, right? So people will look for a ketogenic diet, and they'll try it for a bit, and they get a little results, and then it doesn't work, and then they'll try an Atkins diet, and same thing, right? And to me, the real change for me was understanding that we're all different. So I want to ask you a question on this.
Mm-hmm.
How do I phrase this question? So I believe that the best way that you fix yourself, or you make yourself as healthy as you possibly can be, is focus on you and nothing generic. So get your blood work done, your saliva test, your hair test, whatever, with the right people who we're trying to cultivate on this podcast, such as you, Karla, and then find out what your body needs, right?
Right.
Not go on a ketogenic diet. So my question is, what do you think of that individual kind of like way of focusing on yourself rather than being generic? Are there also some very simple generic things that people should be doing or should be avoiding just because you're part of the human race?
Multi-part question there.
Yes.
Yes. So I am a firm believer in bioidentical or bio. Now I've lost my word here. An individual biochemistry. That's what I was looking for.
Right.
You know, your genetics are part Asian. My genetics are Irish, English, Scandinavian, Icelandic. You know, we come from completely different parts of the world. You know, we're mixes of a lot of different things, but we have sort of general tendencies in terms of what we respond to dietarily. One of the things, you know, in talking to clients, I will ask them, you know, so where did, you know, the preponderance of your great grand ancestors come from? And what were their ancestral foods? Or maybe what did your great grandparents eat? You know, in terms of, you know, people who come from hot climates eat very, very differently than people who come from the high northern latitudes, you know, very, very different. So just giving somebody briefly a ketogenic diet, or, you know, I'm not fond of diets per se, because then it's automatically labeling an eating system. But, you know, sometimes people's systems do need to calm down. It needs to lighten. You know, we've overdone it with the junk food, the fast food, the non-food, food-like substances. So sometimes diets can help, you know, for a few weeks normalize this. But it's finding out what the person responds to. You know, sometimes they do better on a higher grain, higher vegetable diet, especially if you relate things to people's blood types. Whereas, for example, blood type O's, you know, we make the worst vegetarians and vegans in the world, because we have to have tons of fat and tons of protein. So, you know, that's one way to sort of individualize it a little bit, is, you know, do a little bit of blood typing. But in terms of nutrients, you know, everybody has generic nutrient needs. For example, we all have to have nutrients like magnesium and zinc and B vitamins. Those are some of the building blocks, major building blocks, along with iron, of happy brain chemistry. We have to have, and for people who are vegetarians and vegans, this is hard to hear, but, we really, for people who have addiction problems, it's really hard to overcome addiction when you're not eating animal protein, because there is so little of the, even if you have a quote unquote complete protein by combining, say, corn and beans, or beans and rice, or something like that, 60% of that right off the bat is just carbohydrates. And then of the remaining 40%, that's your protein. And of that, the parts that actually are there and available to become happy brain chemistry are diminished. So, when I'm working with somebody in recovery, one of the first things I will ask them is, are you willing to eat animal protein therapeutically till we get you out of this? Because otherwise you're just going to be taking pills and pills and more pills. And so what happens is, just to take it a step back further, is when we have the animal protein, it's made up of things like amino acids. That's actually the building blocks of protein. Amino acids like tryptophan. You can go to the health food store and buy capsules of tryptophan, and you take them and they help you sleep. They boost your mood. It's really hard to get these nutrients from vegetarian diets. The aminos are there, but because they're not, for the most part, not complete proteins, they're limited in the body's ability to use them. So, you look at the nutrient profile, it says, well, it says it's there, but the reality is it becomes very difficult. And then a second problem is vegetarian diets tend to be very rich in copper, things like legumes or beans, kale, some of the dark leafy greens, chocolate. You sort of look at a typical vegetarian diet and it's like copper, 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 copper. We need less than a milligram. But, after food analysis, most vegetarians get around 8 to 9 milligrams, not micrograms, not less than a milligram. They're getting like 8 or 9 milligrams of this, and there are almost no sources of vegetable zinc. And so what happens is copper builds up in the brain. It makes us more agitated. It makes us more anxious. It makes us more irritable. It makes us more ready to fly off the handle in irritation. Whereas the mineral zinc, when that gets into the brain, it's soothing, it's calming, it's part of the pathway of taking our food that we're eating, the nutrients we're consuming, and mixed with different enzymes. Zinc is one of the major additions that will actually help us get to things like serotonin, where we're calm, we're optimistic, we have a good sense of humor. So it's looking at, the broad picture of what the food choices we're consuming are doing to us. And if you have stuff that comes out of cans and boxes, they might sprinkle a few synthetic vitamins in there, and sometimes, they're forced to reinforce it, by the government, because people think they're like with these boxes of, non-dairy milk, people were thinking, oh, it's a good source of calcium. It's like, well, no, there wasn't. So a lot of them now add it as an addition because people thought that they were going to be getting it. So, it's really separating everything that goes into our body. And poor nutrition, we were talking about stress. And I just wanted to give you, just before we leave the topic of stress, so here's my little cup of stress here, and it's about half full. Mm-hmm. And so, we have the stressors that we were talking about earlier, like family conflict and work issues and kids that act up, or, people who have a lifestyle where they're, city to city to city and they're constantly jet lagged. But, there's stressors, for example, like just poor digestion. We're low in hydrochloric acid. So when we eat meat, it sits in our stomach for hours. It feels awful. We think, well, I shouldn't be eating meat because I can't digest it. The reality is we're low in zinc and folate and iron and some other things that actually help us make hydrochloric acid. So we cut meat out of our diet. We're low in digestive enzymes. We're not absorbing the food. Our intestines are really stressed from the stress of alcohol. There's chronic alcoholism, certain foods like the gluten grains, wheat especially, people who chronically use what are called NSAIDs, things like Aleve and aspirin. really hard on the intestines. So if you're drinking a lot and then in the morning you're taking a lot of aspirin and then, you're going to the store and, having a giant baguette, that could be really doing a lot of intestinal damage. And so you're not absorbing, even if you're eating a pretty good diet, you're not absorbing. And then, we talked about Candida and other bad bugs or dysbiosis, food sensitivities. Sometimes, we eat things and we don't feel well. So we think, wow, that's really stressing me out. Maybe I should go have a couple of drinks. Just nutrient deficiencies. It's such a long list. I'm sort of like reading it over here. Blood sugar swings, where your blood sugar is up and down and up and down. Every time it crashes, you get a flood of cortisol and adrenaline, which then makes you really anxious and hangry, that hungry, angry. People who chronically diet and they eat too few calories. The body is in constant stress. Your little stress cup, if you think of my list here, and think of your cup of stress and the things that you know about. But this is before you even get out of bed in the morning. I'm adding to these things. So, calorie restriction, too few calories. We're not eating the right foods. Yo-yo dieting, up and down and up and down. Weight goes up, weight goes down. Weight goes up, weight goes down. Really hard on our system, really hard on our thyroid. People who use caffeine, that's easy. You get caffeine, the adrenals immediately put out stress hormones, cortisol. There goes your anxiety. It helps us wake up and helps us motivate, but it becomes this sort of that circle of anxiety and stress. People who don't stop exercising. Oh my gosh, I've lost track of the people. It's like, oh, let's see, I'm at the gym every single day and I do cardio for an hour and I do weightlifting for an hour and then I go for a run, and it's like, do you have days off? No. It is really incredibly stressful for the body to do daily exercise. Chronic pain, whether from an accident, headaches, things like that. Poor dental health, the body is flooded with bacteria, major stressor. Heavy metals, talking about, dental health, having a mouthful of silver, which is basically, a euphemism for mercury.
Yeah.
And then there's other toxins like, maybe pesticide or herbicides or fungicide on our food, or we live in the city and, we walk outside, we're breathing smog, mold in people who live in wetter climates. And then what are called occult or hidden infections, things like Lyme disease, or maybe we had mono as a kid, or herpes. So, there's your stress cup going up and up and up and up. And and then, if there's not some nutrients that are coming into the stress cup that are helping your body modulate that and keeping it, relatively normal. So your stress cup goes up to here. And then let's say you're in the grocery store and, you remember you forgot your shopping list. That one drop is enough to put you into a full panic attack. That's where you can't breathe. You feel like your heart is pounding 1,000 miles a minute. You think you're having a heart attack. Most people that have this end up going to the ER 3, 4, or 5 times, told, no, you're not dying. You're just having a panic attack here. Take a couple of Xanax. It'll calm you down. So it's really important to understand all of our stressors because, diet is a really big part of this. If we're not getting the nutrients that help us manage stress, and then we have that long list of things that are operating in the background, then it becomes much easier to keep indulging in alcohol because we're chronically stressed, but we can't figure out what it is. We think, well, yeah, I've got a crummy work life, but I shouldn't be having panic attacks. But if you start looking at, how many of these different hidden stressors are part of our stress cup, then it makes it easier to deconstruct all the things, because if we just say, oh, okay, get another job. Well, that might make it easier, but is that going to empty the cup? Probably not.
Yeah, I could see there a real problem if, I viewed stress as a very one-dimensional thing. Best way to best example is my daughter falls and breaks her arm. I am now stressed. And then I'm anxious to see if her arm's going to fix itself, right? So that is my very one-dimensional look at stress, which means there's an inherent danger there because if you take the stress cup theory, and my cup is a little bit bigger, if you take the stress cup theory, you could end up that it's over time, like you said, because of these environmental stresses, these internal stresses, the lack of nutrients, etc., that you could be at work and then just something happens at work, like you say, that little drop, and you blow and you have a panic attack. But
Yep.
because you don't understand stress the way that you've explained it, which I didn't, you could then think to yourself, I hate my job. This is always happening when I'm in work. But it could just be luck that your stress cup was at its peak at the time you was in work, because you're not really understanding that you need to check what mattress you've got, that you're living next to a main road where you've got all these diesel fumes being blown into your face when you're walking down the road. And a couple of questions come out of that. You said when you were talking about amino acids as an example, and I know as a vegan, I have to take amino acid supplements, for example. But you said you used the word until you get out of this. So I got the feeling that sometimes people, I had this feeling when I got sick recently. I was like, oh my God, I got to take these things and do this for the rest of my life. But it sounded like you were talking about doing some work with a person, let's just say me, to get that, what you said, that state of homeostasis back in balance. And then you wouldn't necessarily need to keep continuing to do all these, over supplement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Am I reading that right? Is this?
That is exactly right. What I'm proposing and how my work is I actually dig down. I do the deep dives with people. I look at what is going on with you. I don't just say, oh, you have this, here, take that. It's like, okay, let's look at all these different things that are going on with you. Yeah, I may have to put you on a lot of stuff right now because you have this deficiency and that deficiency, and and you need this and this and this, and people are going, oh my God, I don't like to take pills, and here she has me on like 14 different supplements. But what we're doing is I tell people to think of it like summer school. School is like 9 months of the year, and it dribbles out a little bit, whereas summer school, it's very shortened, but really intense. And so that's sort of my analogy for what I do. Is it is sort of like putting people through summer school. So we look at their stress. We might do a saliva cortisol test, for example, to look at the specific diurnal rhythm, or even sometimes the nighttime, to see what's going on. Are they too high? Are they too low? Are they just right? And help them that way. I may or will work with them on diet, making sure that they're eating enough food, making sure they're eating often enough, making sure they're getting the right macronutrient ratio for them, whether it's carbohydrates, fat, protein in some particular ratio for that particular person. And working on things like sleep and lifestyle and stress management, and addressing other things that may need to be handled. But once we have all of those pieces together, it's like, okay, so we've got, the diet piece over here, and then we've got, some answers on some questionnaires over here, and we've got some food logs that are saying, we're doing this and this, and it's sort of like a jigsaw puzzle. So, as we're getting the pieces, we're putting the picture of good health back together. And then, once the puzzle is completed, you're not still trying to shove pieces in there. It's like, okay, the picture is complete. But, it depends on, is the person willing to stop doing this, add that, change this? If they're not, then, they get really stuck in their way, and it's like this way or no way. And it's like, it's like, if you're not willing to change to help yourself, I can't help you. I'm not a miracle worker. The things I work with, work really, really well, but I can only meet you halfway. You have to be willing to do some of the work. If you are not willing to, do this or change that, it becomes very frustrating for both ends.
Yeah, I remember what my turning point in terms of the way that I don't look at diets per se. I look at, this is the way that I live my life. This is how I try to treat my body as like a car, and I want to provide it with the right fuel. But I did an 8-week liver cleanse once, just experimenting really, Karla, and I imagined if people were doing the 8-week liver cleanse at that moment, 2 of the non-negotiables for a lot of people would have been sugar and alcohol. Like people would have said, there's no way I'm not drinking alcohol for
Right.
2 months. And there's no way I'm not, but to me, after those 8 weeks, my body changed considerably. My mind, my thinking, it was weird. It was almost like my body was directing me towards what I should eat, not my brain.
Right.
I know it sounds pretty silly, but that's how it felt.
No, it's called, for a lot of people, they call it intuitive eating.
Mm.
But it does require being very in touch with yourself. And it does require, that the person have some fundamentals of nutrition. Because sometimes people will be on a diet, they go, oh, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. And at first they feel wonderful on it, partly just because they're not eating junk all the time. They feel amazing. They feel light. They feel like, wow, this was the best thing in the world. I'm going to stick with this. But it was meant to only be for a short period of time, to lighten the load, to give the digestive system a time to clear out, to just sort of, help the body detoxify. But it's not meant to be, people are not meant to live in a state of constant detox. It's really, really hard on the body. And
Right.
so, then it's like, okay, so we've cleaned ourselves out. Now we need to add back nutrient-rich food that is going to support blood sugar, that's supporting brain chemistry, that's supporting adrenal and thyroid health, that is supporting sleep, our mood, all our different aspects. And when we are doing that for ourselves, that actually takes a huge load of stress off of us, because we have become self-empowered. It's like, I can do this, I'm eating a healthy diet. I'm, doing, instead of, running 7 days a week, I'm doing restorative yoga twice a week, and I'm walking just because it's really nice to go out and walk through the neighborhoods. And so I've changed all these things and I feel better. And in doing that, I've taken my health back. Or the other person has taken their health back. And it's really, really empowering, and it feels really good. So that's sort of your situation was, you cleaned yourself out. Some people, struggle significantly with cravings after that, because for some people, the brain chemistry has not been fixed enough that it's going to hold. So it's, that phrase, white knuckling it, it's every day. It's just like this horrid ordeal, and it should be effortless.
Yeah. I actually say to people, if you're going to white knuckle giving up alcohol and it's going to make you miserable, drink alcohol. I mean, because we're all about happiness here. It's not about whether I should drink alcohol or not, or take heroin or not. It's about being happy, So don't do it if you're going to be miserable. It's about state of acceptance, and it's all about happiness for me. I got a question that come up. A beautiful young lady on the Strive Community Forum the other day. She was in the kitchen. She has an emotional eating disorder, or an issue, whatever you want to call it. And she'd finished eating for the day, and there in the kitchen is 10 figs on a plate. And she eats them. She's not hungry enough, and she just ravishes them down. And then the ensuing remorse, shame, etc. kicks in. And when I was reading this check-in that she did on the forum, it was really strange. But at the same time this was happening, and I don't eat figs, my mother-in-law gave me a plate of figs, and I wasn't hungry. I didn't eat them all because they weren't mine.
Right.
But I would have eaten 10. Now I know that animals, and we're an animal.
Yeah.
If everything's going right and the world doesn't screw us up like it is, we would just eat enough and we would stop. A lion would eat enough and then stop. A dog doesn't, because it's domesticated.
Right.
We don't, because we're domesticated, right? So I know that. But putting that aside, myself as what I call a kind of normal human being, I don't stop eating when I'm full, when there's plates of really nice stuff around me. There's a lot of environmental actors, how many people I'm with, whether it's an eat as much as you like buffet, etc. So to me, eating 10 figs when I'm not hungry is just normal. So what's the difference? What's going on between someone who's emotionally eating 10 lots of figs and someone who's just eating 10 lots of figs?
Well, that's another podcast. Oh, okay. So, with emotional eating, there's a couple of components. I'm going to really simplify this. There is emotional, like there might have been childhood abuse. There might have been childhood neglect, where we're feeding ourselves because we have this big hole in our heart, and food makes us feel good. It's comforting. But on the other hand, sometimes it comes from blood sugars instability. We skip breakfast, and that sets us up literally for an entire day of craving for whatever it is, to the point where our brain is so hungry, or thinks it's so hungry, that it just goes, oh my gosh. And figs, I'll tell you, I also can sit down and eat 10 figs. A really good ripe fig is possibly my favorite fruit. It was a great example because they're incredibly sweet. They're juicy if they're good. But is it something I would do every day? No, it's not. But is it wrong in and of itself to go, oh wow, because fig season is really short. So it's like, there's like maybe a dozen days a year. So, am I going to indulge for a day? I might. It's a lot of figs. I might have a stomach ache afterward, but for somebody who is doing the kind of eating where it's every day, then again, I have people step back and say, okay, when I ate that food, I got a mood boost from it. It gave me some energy and helped me kind of get focused. It calmed me down, helped me relax, or it was a treat, it was a reward, it, kind of helped soothed me. And so by looking at, and this could be figs, it could be bread, it could be cookies, it could be ice cream, it could be, any number of these things that we're, overeating or binging on. And I'm talking about chronic binging. I'm not talking about, the random plate of food that, that's what I call opportunity eating. Somebody brings a plate of something by and it's like, I'm not craving that, but, I'm going to eat several of them because it was really nice. But then, it's out of my mind, as opposed to the brain chemistry that's driving us to achieve homeostasis. It's driving us back to balance. What is my brain missing? Oh, I had those figs, I got a really big energy boost and it helped me focus. It's like, okay, and in the morning, all I have for breakfast is 3 cups of coffee. It's like, okay, that's important information about, we need to look at the catecholamines, the things that are going to wake us up and give us motivation. So a lot of binge eating where it's, it's not just like the occasional opportunity eating, but I'm talking where people binge every day, or going even further and go into bulimia, where it's binge purge. That's getting into, some brain chemistry where we really need to look at what is the driver behind this. Often it's really low endorphins. For example, to make serotonin, the optimistic, happy brain chemistry. You have your piece of meat, your protein powder, whatever. It's broken down into amino acids. One of them, tryptophan, goes through with some enzymes and some nutrients and eventually becomes serotonin, makes us feel good. For endorphins, we need up to 19 of the 21 amino acids. What does that mean? That means we have to eat a lot of protein, like protein at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, to get to the point where we are sufficient with the amino acid supply that we can cut off the cravings for comfort. And if we're using alcohol to comfort ourselves, to numb out, to just check out, to give ourselves that little reward or treat, that's low endorphin. One of the ways to get over that, if that's your type of craving, is to go very protein intensive, for however long it takes for that to get away from, that brain driven state, back to, it's like, oh yeah, it was like, yeah, she brought some cookies by, I had one, and it was fine, that I didn't think about it. And that's all I needed, as opposed to, it's like, there's this plate of cookies and I will eat every darn cookie on the plate. And then I may go and, raid the drawer in the kitchen that has a package of cookies and eat all that too.
I think the thing that jumped out at me when you was talking there, and I'm talking like really basic here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So really basic. It's to me, I find, I think I was talking to you about this when we spoke prior to the podcast, was when I stopped drinking and eating a processed food diet and then later on meat, I stopped getting hungry.
Mm-hmm.
But when I do get hungry, it's really late at night. So I just thought then when you were talking, is this a case of me? I'm using me as an example, but this could be anybody listening.
Sure.
Is as the day goes on, starting from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to bed. So here's our spectrum of wake time.
Right.
And we need to replenish and keep feeding our body and exercising and doing all these things to create homeostasis. And
Right.
if we don't do that right as the day goes on, the closer we get to going to bed, our body is going to be screaming more for the things that we didn't give it.
Right.
So more people late at night who say, I don't know what it is, but I just really need snacks at 11 o'clock, or I ate a load of figs at 8 o'clock at night, or 5, 6 o'clock.
Right.
It's because you need to look way back and say, okay, what was my eating like throughout the day?
And one of the things, it's a real interesting, I'm glad you actually touched on this, because one of the fastest ways to diagnose a zinc deficiency in people is to ask them, from the time you wake up until the time you're hungry for breakfast, how many minutes or hours goes by. If you have enough zinc, if you're replete with zinc, you're hungry within 30 or so minutes, you're ready for a big breakfast. People who are zinc deficient are talking about brunch, basically. Well, 10:30, 11 o'clock, I started to get hungry, and it wasn't really, and so this, taken to its extreme, this is anorexia. Anorexia is a massive zinc deficiency, and the people who, that are that are effective at working with people with anorexia and anorectic tendencies is to really superload them with, super physiologic doses of zinc until the point where their appetite comes back. But the problem is there's almost no zinc in vegetarian and less in vegan diets. Mm-hmm. So, what's happening is you're getting more and more copper building up. And, the risk is at some point in the future, even though you're feeling really good now, something could snap, that little bit of extra copper, just like the panic attack. You don't know what that extra sheet of kale might be, one sheet of kale too much. So, that was a great example of how a specific nutrient can have a whole huge impact on our entire day in terms of getting hungry, in terms of binging in the afternoon or in the evening, leaving us out of control, because the brain by the afternoon is, it's in full panic mode. It just wants to go, wah, 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 and just keep shoving, even though, it probably would have been happy after the first cheeseburger, but here you are 4 later and, three milkshakes. But the brain, has been starved. Whereas if you started at the beginning of the day because you had enough zinc and had a breakfast and had lunch and had a snack and had dinner, you might have a little snack before bed, but maybe not.
And Hannah, how does low blood sugar weave into that then?
So, and that's actually a really good question too. You got all these great questions.
Do you know why that is? Because I'm so clueless about all this stuff.
Oh, well, good. That's perfect. So to really super simplify this is, so our brain, depending upon the size of the person, weighs between 4 and 5 pounds. It uses 20% of all the glucose we take in. For something this big, that's a huge amount of glucose, and the brain wants what it wants. So if it starts to get hungry, it will, initially send off a little notice to the liver, which, there's stores all over the body, but the liver is kind of the primary storage of this pre-sugar called glycogen. Right. And the liver goes, well, yeah, I've got a lot here, but, to release that, I've got to talk to the adrenal glands. I need a large hit of adrenaline and cortisol. So boom, so you get that and it releases it, and so you end up with a little bit more stability. It's what, helps us sleep through the night a lot, or gets us through the afternoon. But, if that keeps going on day after day, you know, or the blood sugar gets too low, we've gone too many hours, and there's this, you know, this hit of adrenaline and cortisol day after day after day after day. If you have the genetic tendencies, that in and of itself can set off a panic attack. And it's causing the body to be flooded with these sister hormones. So that also can be a driver behind binge eating. Because if you're really anxious, you know, and you're flooded with these hormones, you know, it's like, oh, I know that, you know, if I ate a plate of cookies, it's going to calm me down and soothe me. So, you know, that blood sugar, you know, again, when it goes too low, you know, it's sort of what I call, it's a term I made up. It's what I call chasing hypoglycemia. You know, we don't have enough breakfast, or we have no breakfast at all. So we're already, you know, like, so here's our baseline, you know, and in theory, you know, we eat breakfast and we should be here. But the day goes by, we've had no breakfast, you know, we're down here. We eat, we may, you know, get us up to here, but maybe the brain wants here. It's got this big deficit, you know, and then you eat, but it doesn't get you to where you need. And so as the day goes on, it's like, it gets worse and worse. And then by 5 o'clock, that's where so many people are vulnerable to binge drinking, binge eating. It's like the brain at that point is so distressed, and the body is so flooded with stress hormones that it's just like, we just can't stop ourselves. So it's like you said, taking it all the way back to the beginning of the day and getting the beginning of the day taken care of. So what it's doing is, it's sort of, you know, you were sort of describing like making a snowball. You know, it's kind of small in the morning, but as the day goes by, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it becomes so overwhelming you can't manage it. Mm-hmm. So what we want to do is just have a bunch of like normal snowballs that, you know, we can pick up and throw, rather than one that's so big we just can no longer deal with it.
So as this is all, to me, this comes down to a lack of experience, lack of knowledge, lack of preparation, lack of awareness. Once you've got all those things, which I got to be honest, I fit into a lot of those categories. I'm the type of guy who wakes up in the morning, Carl, and I say to myself, what have I got to do today? And eating food is nowhere near on my list.
Right.
It's just, I got to interview Karla, and then I got to look after my daughter, and then I've got to do all these articles. I've got to do these training courses. And if no one's making me food, I'm ruined, right? So let's say our blood sugars are going really low, and then we think about alcohol. Mm-hmm. Why alcohol? Is it the glucose?
It may not be. I mean, it may be for people with that genetic tendency, because they have gotten themselves hypoglycemic, and they know that for them, the alcohol is a quick way to get glucose to the brain. So, you know, in that case, they're not medicating brain chemistry as much as they're just trying to manage their hypoglycemia. And, you know, there have not been really studies, but, you know, based on the work that I've been doing in the clinic I was associated with for 15 years, almost 100% of people with alcoholism are hypoglycemic. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's like, if you cannot manage your blood enough and eating the right kinds of food, you know, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when it's going to happen.
So what's going on here though, Karla? Because I can't imagine, I'm just going to sort this out now. I can't imagine somebody, the blood sugar's low.
Yeah.
And it's 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And in that moment, they talk to themselves in their mind, mm-hmm. I need a drink to fix this low blood sugar level. I can't imagine that happens. So,
no, it doesn't.
So the body just, the gut, I guess, or the body is driving, we need to do something now. And then I guess we fall into habit. What is that something?
You know, and that something can be completely different for everybody. You know, I've heard all kinds of ways of, you know, coping with things like that. So, mm-hmm. you know, for people with the genetics, it's alcohol. You know, it gives a temporary blood sugar boost. It also may soothe, boost the mood of, calm down, wake up the brain chemistry. So, it's not a blanket thing that happens to everybody, but with the genetics, so like there could be somebody out there who at 5 o'clock goes, okay, I know a Snickers bar is like the fastest way to get me up and get me going. Somebody else is, it's like, I'm hitting Starbucks on the way home, and I'm going to get, one of the giant sweet drinks. And other people, they go for the alcohol because their brain it's not saying, oh, I'm low on glucose, I need to do this. It's just saying, I need something that's going to get me, feeling stable again. And alcohol for me is the fastest way to do it based on past experiences.
This is fascinating because right. I remember when I used to drink alcohol a lot in work. So I would finish work, I don't know, 4 or 5 o'clock. At the time I'm finishing work, I'm hungry, right? Because I've already had all my dinner, I've got no more food left for me. I'm tired because I've just finished a long day's work, and I got to go home, and a new set of challenges are going to appear. My wife's going to be there, got stuff I need to do, my kids are going to want me to play with them, etc. So on my way home, I would always stop in the pub. Mm-hmm. Now, and I would never do it alone. I would always be with people. No, that's not true. I would do it alone occasionally, but generally I would be with work colleagues. But I would never say to myself, oh, I need to drink alcohol because of this. It would just be, I would just do it. Now I don't drink alcohol. If I go to my mum's house for something and I'm short of food and I've got a 40-minute drive home, which could be an hour depending on traffic, do you know what I do? I drive into the garage on the way and I buy myself crisps, right? Now, again, I don't know what's going on. I'm certainly not having a conversation with my inner mind telling myself to do this, but it's become a habit that has replaced the pub. It's like I have rules in my life. I can't eat meat. I can't eat sugar. I can't drink alcohol. So because those rules are so solidified in my life, my habits and routines change. So I can't go to the pub anymore because it's alcohol, but I can go to the garage. But I can't have a Snickers because I don't eat sugar, but I can eat some crappy crisps, which probably contains some sugar. Right. But while all this is going on, I'm not thinking it.
No, you're not.
Something else is driving me. It's incredible.
It's your brain chemistry trying to normalize itself. So there's a component that goes, I'm really hungry. I just need calories. I need glucose. So what you have learned was the fastest way to get that was alcohol, is, crisp, crackers and cookies and things like that. Yeah. Just junk. Other people, it might be, a can of soda or two. So it's different for each of us. And then, I would ask a question of you. So so part of the equation is your brain is it's frankly starving, and it's hungry, and it knows from past experience, if you eat this, it's going to get a flood of glucose within 3 to 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. So when I had a glass of wine, or 3 or 4 beer, whatever it was, I got a mood boost. It helped with my depression and anxiety. It calmed me down and helped me manage stress. It gave me a little energy to get through the evening, or, it was just, I went to the pub and it was just a way to like numb out from the day and sort of, forget about it for a while before I had to face my next set of challenges. So, and for some people, it's not, it could be all of them, but usually there's one overriding part of the brain chemistry. Mm. So, what often happens is we replace a habit, alcohol, with another habit, chocolate chip cookies or crisps, or whatever it is. So it's not that, so the worst problem's been solved, but you've created another one.
Do you know what's really interesting as well? If I've got my shit together, pardon my French, then I can finish talking to you now and make myself a really nice, decent salad. And all I've got in there is carrots, some beans, lettuce, etc., right? A salad, right? And I could eat that and I'm fine. 30 minutes later, I might have a smoothie. 30 minutes later, I might have a burrito, whatever. If I'm organized like that, life is cool. Now, if I get in that situation where I'm stuck at my mum's and I got an hour drive and there's nothing I can eat in my mum's house, and that's true, And there's nothing I can eat in the shops where she lives. That is true also. So I end up eating these crisps. At that moment, if I drive into the garage and there's a salad there, I will not eat it. Isn't that weird?
So part of it's because you're hungry. So one of the things, just to take it again, taking a step back is, and I encourage this with almost all my clients, you have to, especially when you don't have a set schedule, it's really important when you don't have a set schedule, is the night before you plan for the day.
Yeah.
So for breakfast, you may take, I'm going to do a smoothie. So I'm going to put a couple of handfuls of, greens in there. I'm going to put some fruit. I'm going to put my protein powder. I'm going to, little booster things. And in the morning, I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to put the liquid in there, put the cap on, buzz, 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 go. I've got a meal there.
Yeah.
I'm packing for lunch, whatever that is. I'm packing for snack eventualities. I might need a morning snack, an afternoon snack. The stores are full of them right now because it's back to school. So they've all these different sizes of insulated lunch bags, everything from the little guys up. I saw one the other day. It was like, oh my God, it's like for an entire picnic, but it was really nice. You open up, there's places to put blue ice. Some of them come with thermoses. So you can, for the winter time, you can put like a hot soup or maybe a chilled soup for the summer. So you take the unpredictability out. You just say, okay, life is like whatever. And so the night before, it's like, I know I have to plan for a minimum of this. I'm just going to pack it. So, I've got it with me. Stuff happens. It will happen. It's like, okay, I'm taking 30 minutes out. I'm just going to go sit someplace. I'm going to eat. I'm going to chill. I'm going to relax. That is taking your life back.
Yeah. Yeah. I can see how ridiculous it is now that I'm running around in this circle of madness, thinking I'm getting better because I don't drink alcohol and I don't have sugar, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm actually making myself very ill just because I'm simply not preparing and planning and putting what I eat higher up my value hierarchy. So my most important thing today is not meeting Karla. Sorry, Karla. My most important thing today is organizing what I'm going to eat tomorrow. That is my, that type of thing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I'm going to ask you a little bit about relapse prevention anxiety, but before we just move into that, we're talking about the body and the brain chemistry needing to stabilize itself, and we need these nutrients, etc., and all these external environmental toxins and all this kind of stuff we have to deal with now in the 21st century that previous people have never had to deal with before.
Exactly.
But what exactly does happen when we drink alcohol? So when someone is like me, drinking one or two bottles of red wine a night with some whiskeys, and on the weekend, going out on a Friday night, having 15 pints of lager and then vodkas and stuff, and then Saturday doing the same. What's happening to my brain and what's happening to my body when I'm doing that?
Well, I mean, on a real simple level, all you have to do is Google before and after photographs of alcoholics, where people had been drinking and then they sobered up. I mean, 20 years off their life. Their faces are globby and doughy and their eyes are vacant. And then, you get them sober and it's like they've lost weight and their eyes are bright and shiny. So that's just on the most, like the most superficial level. But, in terms of what it's doing to the body, one, it is destroying our small intestines where we absorb our nutrients. It's actively causing nutrient deficiencies, especially of the B vitamins. B vitamins are absolutely crucial for happy brain chemistry. So, unless we're doing mega supplementation, it becomes, again, that circle, that downward spiral. We're deficient in these B vitamins, and so we become more vulnerable to alcohol because we're not able to make happy brain chemistry. So we drink, which then causes us to lose even more B vitamins. So it becomes this downward spiral. And then in the brain, it just becomes, these little spikes of, trying to self-medicate. I really need a mood boost. I really need a mood boost. At first it's, the alcohol will take us for a few hours. Then it gets us to the point where, we're binge drinking, we're drinking to passing out, becoming really, really unsafe. So in terms of what is going on in the brain. It's just the brain is becoming more and more desperate as it becomes more and more unhealthy. The fewer nutrients we have coming in, of course, the diet goes down, down the drain. Sleep goes down the drain. It helps us get to sleep, but we wake up 4 hours later and then we're awake for a couple of hours. So now we've lost 2 or 3 hours of sleep in the middle of the night. So that adds to our stress cup. And it just becomes this downward cycle where more alcohol begets a lower mood, begets more nutrient deficiencies, begets less sleep. And, sometimes it requires a DUI or, having an accident where, lucky people like you and some of your listeners out there who, were able to see what was going on, make the decision and step off that merry-go-round. It's really, really hard with relapse though, because if you've not taken in the nutrients that you need to, sometimes in mega doses to replete your body so that you have half a chance or 3/4 or 90%, as I had said, relapse is a massive problem with all kinds of addictions, not just alcohol. And that is because the brain chemistry has never been corrected. All they're doing is drying them out, feeding them some sugar and maybe some tobacco and throwing them back out on the streets, and boom, they're there again. It goes over and over and over. So, it becomes for the body and the brain just this downward cycle. Liver damage. I mean, you don't need me to tell you about what happens to the liver.
No, I think it was really interesting then, when you talked about the vitamin B deficiency and mood. So of course people are always saying, yeah, well, I drink alcohol because it makes me really happy, but ultimately it's not. It's making you really miserable, because it's robbing you of those happiness hormones type of thing. Right. So all right, we've thrown a lot of information at people, and what can people listening to this who have given up drinking alcohol, they really don't want to relapse, they just want to kind of. And they don't want to white knuckle it either. They really want to kind of get this right. But there's a lot of stress and anxiety in their life because they just quit alcohol. Their husband hasn't. There's a little bit of infighting. Their friends don't like him anymore because they're not socializing with them, and they think they're, being judgmental, etc. So they don't want to relapse. They've just changed their life completely, and a little bit stressed and anxious. And we've fired a lot of information at them. How can we kind of like boil that down a little bit?
The whole concept of support is huge. If you have friends, if you have family members who are actively sabotaging you, that becomes a really difficult situation because you're needing to make a decision. Is this about me or is this about them? If it's about me, I may need to leave this relationship. If this is about me, I need to find supportive friends. If these people are egging me on to have a drink, they don't love me. They don't care for me. It's about them. They don't want to feel guilty because they're screwing up. They want to pull me down to their level. So that is a whole huge self-conversation that often requires therapy. Yeah. But in terms of the other component, it is doing things in terms of, changing food, changing lifestyle, going into therapy if needed, getting on specific nutrients, working with somebody who has experience in the field of addiction and brain chemistry. It's something I've taught for the last 4 years, helping health professionals, literally all over the world, who do therapy and just say, gosh, this person's been in therapy for like 18 years and we just keep getting stuck at the same spot. And I know if, it's because they're just, they're too stuck in themselves. They're too inwardly drawn. And by learning to use some amino acids, GABA, tryptophan, things like that, like, wow, all of a sudden it's like we're making breakthroughs because they're not so stuck in their head. They can actually start making progress. And recovery is like that too. If you're constantly stuck in your head drinking and then self-recrimination and stress, and then the stress leads to more need for self-medication, and it just becomes this, again, it's that circle, and finding the spot where it's like, okay, I'm going to step off. And now, you've got some ideas of a lot of different areas. Listen to the podcast again, because we've really covered a lot of different areas here, in terms of managing things like, pardon me, adrenaline and cortisol, understanding how you're self-medicating by maybe taking the quiz, the craving assessment on my website, so that you can see, it's like, oh, wow, I thought I was drinking for this, but, according to this, I'm drinking for all of this. So understanding why you're needing the alcohol is a huge first step.
Yeah.
And then making a decision, I need to really revamp my life. My life is out of control. It's not supporting me. I need to change my diet. I need to get somebody supportive, who's going to say, do this and not that. And this could be really helpful, and go out from there.
Great advice. And we're going to just round up by just answering a few questions from Eleni on the Strive Forum. Again, it's our favorite topic, sugar.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. Eleni asks, should people try to completely abstain from sugar?
My answer on that would be yes. And especially for people with alcohol, because going back to our conversation with Candida, Candida loves, they love things like alcohol. Alcohol has a lot of Candida in it. So what's going to happen is if you, this is on one hand, if you don't give up the sugar, it sets you up for more. And the thing about sugar is it's literally called an anti-nutrient. You actually, by eating sugar, you actually burn more B vitamins than you're getting in your diet. So that leaves you even more nutrient deprived. So on the one hand, sugar sets you up for possible relapse. And then on the other hand, the other thing that sugar does is it superloads our taste buds. So it's like if it's not as bright and vibrantly, disgustingly sweet as sugar is, it's like, oh, vegetables don't taste good. Even fruit doesn't taste. I get a lot of people say, oh, I don't like the taste of fruit. It's not very sweet. And it's like, okay, that's a real zinc deficiency. Yeah. Vegetables actually are sweet.
Right.
If you have enough zinc, you are actually able to get the sugar that you need from natural fruits and vegetables.
Right. That's interesting. That's probably why I like vegetables more now that I don't drink alcohol, because they probably taste different than they ever did before. Especially
if you're off the sugar, because it's not leaving your taste buds. So, it's like, they're just sort of like, they're not, but it's almost like it's seared, it's like, it has to be that much more intense or I can't even taste it.
2 more questions on sugar for Eleni there. And the other one was, what's your views on sugar substitutes like honey, agave, stevia, that kind of stuff?
So sugar is sugar. Agave is actually, it's almost like high fructose corn syrup. It's actually worse for your body than sugar is. And there's whole interesting exposés all over the internet about agave and high fructose corn syrup. Honey, once a person has cleaned themselves out, maybe done a Candida treatment, if it turns out they have Candida, sugar can be, I don't mean sugar, I mean things like honey can be, something that, like I might use a teaspoon of honey once a week on something. That is what I'm talking about. Not, I've got to have honey on this and I've got to have sugar on that. Stevia, it doesn't impact blood sugar ups and downs like things like aspartame and Splenda do. But again, if you've ever put any on your tongue, it is so insanely hyper sweet. It goes into the bitter realm. I mean, like literally,
I don't like
just it's an acquired taste, because it's so strong. And again, if you're doing that to your taste buds, it makes it that much harder for things like fruits and vegetables to taste good.
Yeah, good point. And I just want to add a point to that as well is, for me, Sugar is obviously, there's something going on with my brain chemistry with sugar. I've quit everything in life. Sugar has been the most difficult one for me. And I'm going to go, what I've taken out of this is maybe a Candida thing. I don't know. But what I will say is this: for me, psychologically, it's really important that I divorce myself away from sugar being good and nice, etc., etc. I really try to work hard on that. But if you give me some honey or some agave or some stevia, it keeps that link. It keeps that bond. Mm-hmm. It keeps my memory reminding me what sugar's like. It's the same with, right. I have the same view of low or non-alcoholic beers. I don't like them because I just want people to get away from it.
Right.
But you're keeping that connection by keeping drinking it, and you're more likely to relapse. Last question. And this one confuses everybody. I don't know why it does, but it does. What about natural sugars in fruit?
So there's a lot of different types of sugar. Fruit has primarily fructose, but there's also glucose, and there's other OSE words. So, I have to say it depends on the person.
Right.
So one of the things is for people who are not Polynesian, who are not South Pacific type people, I say, you really don't have a lot of ancestral business eating things like bananas, mangoes, pineapple, guavas, these tropical fruits, because they're so high in sugar. But then if you think of, you go to the standard fruits you see in the store, it's pears and apples and grapes and things like that. But then you look at the bars, for maybe some naturally sweetened, sugar-free fruit bars, for example, some granola bars, and you go, wow, these are really sweet. There's no sugar. And you look at the back and it says sweetened with grape juice, apple juice, and pear juice. And it's because they're so crazy sweet. So what I encourage people to do is eat fruit that has a lot of fiber in it. For example, things like kiwi or berries, because it has fructose and glucose and some of the other fruit sugars in it. The seeds slow it down. So the seeds are fiber, and the fiber takes the simple, like the bananas go, it's like sort of like eating candy bars. But berries and kiwi, for example, it's sort of like this gentle rise and a gentle drop off, because the fruit has the seeds in it, and the seeds slow down the release of glucose. So it's a gentler rise. There's no hit from it. And then it's a gentle taper off.
I just want to add to that as well. I make sure that I have a juice every day, like but I don't juice it. I smoothie it. So I keep the fiber in it.
Okay, good.
So I just wanted to just say that. And also just touching on what Karla said about it's all different for individual. I've been advised that I shouldn't eat fruit other than apples after 3:00, just because my body has a tough time with it. But everybody is going to be different. So, we touched on this a lot earlier on about each person seeking professional help like Karla to understand exactly what you need. The classic example right there. If your ancestry never used to eat this particular food, you might want to avoid it, Okay, I have one final question. I'm going to let you go. This is from Strive Forum member Lee.
Hi, Lee.
And this is because I'm living in my brother-in-law's house at the moment, 3 kids. One of them is lactose intolerant, so she's drinking flaxseed milk.
Okay.
And I noticed the flaxseed milk, and I noticed coconut milk as well. I was like, oh wow, you're transferring over to different milks.
Right.
And the lad said, no, I love milk, cow's milk. And I said, ooh, that's bad for you. And he said, why? And I said, oh, I don't know. What's your view on cow's milk?
So yes and no. A significant portion, like maybe as much as 80 to 90% of the adult population of the entire world is lactose intolerant. So we're just missing enzymes to be able to convert the lactose to lactase. So we get gas and bloat and diarrhea and things like that. So it just physically makes us uncomfortable. There's a group of people that are really responsive to this compound in dairy called casomorphin. And casein is a primary protein that's very concentrated in cheese, but morphin, think of morphine. And so the brain has these opioid receptors, and in susceptible people, these casomorphins fit into the receptor, and oh my God, do we feel good? Do we get a hit from this, it literally is a significant addiction. In fact, gluten has gluteomorphin, and people can literally, they get high from it. They addicted to it. And when you take them off, they go through physical withdrawal. They go through 3 to 7 days of fever and shakes and not feeling good. But the other thing that can happen too is sometimes on the cellular level, when we eat a food that's not good for us, it's perceived, we don't perceive it, but the body perceives it as irritation. Irritation gets translated to pain.
Right.
And so pain, the body releases endorphins. Endorphins are the runner's high. It's euphoria. It makes us feel good. It's soothing. It's a reward. It's a treat. So there you go, you get this little hit of dairy, and you're just going, wow, I felt so good when I eat that. And so it can become addictive. I actually had a client who named her cats after different kinds of cheeses.
I listened to, I think it was Rich Roll's podcast, and there was this real world champion heavyweight lifter, like a Hulk, and he was talking about his addiction to milk, how he had withdrawal symptoms and stuff. I guess milk is also full of sugar.
Well, yeah, there's natural milk sugars. So if you look at the carton and you look at the nutrient profile, it'll say carbohydrate, but it'll say sugar. And not everything, like if you looked at pasta, it would have carbohydrates and maybe a little bit of fiber, but there would be like almost no detectable sugar. So things like milk actually do have quite a bit of sugar in them. If you look at yogurt cartons, you get the plain full fat yogurt and you look at it and it's like, wait a minute, it has 12 grams of sugar. Every 4 grams of sugar is 1 measuring teaspoon. 4 grams sounds like a little tiny bit, but it's like, okay, that little pot of yogurt, even though they added no sugar to it, naturally contains literally 1 measuring tablespoon of sugar. That's a lot. So you have to kind of look at labels too. Oh, I'm avoiding sugar, but I'm eating all this food that has all this natural sugar in it too. So it all adds to our sugar burden.
Karla, I want to thank you for your time. Everybody on everyone on the forum right now is going crazy nuts about food. People posting, I love it though. Like people posting photographs of 6 donuts.
Oh gosh.
But they're brave enough, and they're getting that support within the community to be able to say, look, I'm really ashamed of this, but I'm showing you all because this isn't right, and I'm going to change it. And there are more questions on my forum of people who are quitting alcohol about food than alcohol. So, and I know you do. You did some. I think it was 3 podcast episodes in Alison Mickel's show. Right. Yeah. I did 2 on pyroluria. It's an inherited condition, and then I did 1 on stress and anxiety. Yeah. And I'm going to link to those because I think they're excellent. Great, I just want to, just say I'm really grateful that you're doing the work you're doing. And I'm going to urge everybody to get over to your site and to check you out and do some work with you. Because if you're listening to this, folks, honestly, this is priority number 1 in your life, right? If you are not fit and healthy, if you are not feeling right, if your mood levels aren't right, then your relationship with your wife or your husband is going to go to pot. Your time and energy you spend with your children is not going to be there. The effort and energy you put into your work is not going to be as good as it can be. Everything about this screams to me that the number 1 thing we need to do is get our life into order. And I know from personal experience that quitting alcohol, quitting sugar, being vegan doesn't cut it. That doesn't equal health, right? It really doesn't. And I will be myself doing some work with Karla, sharing my learning exercises with you guys. So Karla, thank you very much. Thank you so much. I had so much fun. I hope you had some takeaways from this. I hope you all learned something. And it's a lot. I gave you a lot of information, so I do encourage you to maybe listen to it again, to sort of help you sort of like straighten different components out, because it was, there were a lot of different areas we covered. But, I know if you're here listening to Lee's podcasts, you're committed, you're already like more than 50% of the way, because you're doing this self-empowering thing on your own before you even made another step. So congratulations. Thank you, Karla.